Alrighty everyone, welcome back. It is now March 22nd of 2023, and with The Mandalorian Season 3, Chapter 20 now officially out on Disney+, a lot of Star Wars fans out there are looking forward to Chapter 21 and what Jon and Dave have to offer for the second half of Mando Season 3. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future Star Wars updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. Now, given that there's a lot of things happening with a lot of other shows out there, such as The Acolyte and Skeleton Crew, given that Jon and Dave are helping out with roughly 40% for each show, really trying to at least make those shows into decent installments once they actually get unveiled on Disney+, because for a while now, for the past couple of months, it's been quite a rough road for Kathleen Kennedy, Leslie, and Jon Watts. Now that brings us to the Acolyte series, and specifically what's really going on as of late when it comes to all the test screenings and all the test footage that has been supplied by Kathleen Kennedy, and how Disney executives have been very unimpressed and just very flat out unhappy and disgusted with a lot of the results of the Acolyte series. Now, as you all know, The Acolyte does have a slightly higher budget than that of The Mandalorian Season 3, and so each episode did cost quite a bit of money, per episode. I know one of them at least cost $20 million, and that just goes to show you exactly how much is being poured into the show. Now, with that being put out there, we know one thing about The Acolyte is that there's been a lot of trouble on all fronts. The stunts, the sets, the acting, the firings, the rehirings of specific, crew and employees, stuff like that. A lot of drama surrounding the show. It hasn't really been the most pleasant experience for Kennedy and really trying to get this thing, going. So, on top of that, with The Acolyte still going through many issues by Kathleen Kennedy and Leslie Headland, one of the big scenes from the show is currently in a bad situation after Disney executives got to examine the recent footage provided by Kennedy. The scene in detail is described to actually be so bad and very controversial that many Disney board members want to cancel the show altogether or label it as a non-canon series if they can't figure out a way to normalize the show. The Acolyte series is in big trouble right now, currently, after more test footage was delivered by Kennedy to Disney executives. One of the scenes that got Disney very worried involved a full-fledged scene where the two Jedi are fighting two Sith Lords inside of a Sith temple. The test screening of this episode in particular left Disney disgusted over how poorly the stunts were coordinated and how lackluster the acting was between all four characters. Story-wise, Disney did not mind what was going on. However, the acting and stunts are best described to come straight from a B-labeled action film. The action scene was overloaded with comedy relief that left many of the executives calling for this scene to be deleted. The sequence involved Carrie-Anne Moss's character as well as 3 other unknown actors that played minor roles for the scene in particular as well. Now, I want to stop here real quick. Now, the thing that we know a lot about when it comes to the Acolyte is that, yes, we know that Leslie is aiming for it to be a very dark and gritty series with some comedy elements thrown in there, and I don't really know if that's going to work with Star Wars at all. I can already hear a lot of fans raising their arms about this, and I agree. I feel that when you have an action scene, specifically a lightsaber battle or duel, whatever have you, you don't throw comedy relief in there. You just don't. You could have a thing with Anakin and Obi-Wan, saying a little one-liner that may make you chuckle a little bit for a second in between the fight. But during the fight, and having 2 Sith face 2 Jedi, and going all out in a war here, where there's comedy relief, it takes away the seriousness, it takes away the stakes, and it really kind of devalues the whole situation. So, given that Leslie has been trying to create this new tone or this different type of aim for Star Wars by combining both darkness and grittiness with comedy, almost like a dark comedy mixed with Star Wars, I'm not quite sure how a lot of fans are going to like that. I think a lot of fans are going to reject it, to be quite honest with you. The fact that the Disney executives were absolutely disgusted with the stunts that were done and how the stunts that were being used for the actual episode 4 to be specific, were labeled as very much like it came straight out of a B-labeled action film. Which, that's pretty bad if you poured that much money into episode 4, which, by the way, was roughly, give or take, $20 million for one episode. This is the one that was said to be the most expensive one out of all 8. So moving on to the next one here, what's really all the more, I guess you could say, worrisome about this is that when they shot the scene, the sets were actually completely unfinished, with Leslie demanding that they fund the show more to use CGI to complete the physical sets and the construction digitally. Bob Iger stepped in after the screening reportedly and immediately called for the scene to be deleted. Many of them were labeling this as a disgrace that Kennedy and Leslie actually labeled this as one of the best episodes of the show, and it cost roughly $20 million on this episode, where the scene, let alone the entire episode, appeared as if it was worth only $100,000 that went into the making of this chapter, perhaps even less than that in value and budget. In simplest ways of describing this, Disney actually paid or overpaid for a bad product made by Kennedy and Leslie and are calling for further changes, essentially. So, here's the other thing about this, is that, yes, in the beginning, I've admitted this before, the Acolyte sounded great on paper. The High Republic, at the very end of the High Republic specifically, which is more or less the prequel trilogy era, and it was all about emerging dark side powers, how the Jedi infiltrate or how the Sith infiltrate the Jedi Order, stuff like that. Very basic things on paper, makes it sound amazing. But when you dive into these specifics about how poorly things are being executed and produced by Kathleen Kennedy and Leslie Headland, this most definitely explains why we have not been hearing anything, really, officially speaking, about the Acolyte. Or even Skeleton Crew, mind you, which has been going through a similar, problematic scenario. So, I think that at the end of the day, we're going to have more delays. You're going to have different setbacks, because everything is delayed, guys. All these little, hoops that they have to shoot through is going to eventually catch up to them. And you're probably going to get another delay announced sometime by this summer, or maybe even at Celebration, when they talk more about the Acolyte. If they talk more about the Acolyte. I'm sure that they will, but not a whole lot. So, anyways, given that the stunts were lackluster, the sets were completely unfinished, and Leslie was calling for additional funds, and by the way, about that specifically, she was asking for a couple $100,000 more in funds to digitally fill in the unfinished areas of the physical sets, which is horrible and sounds ridiculous to me. So I don't know where they're going with this show. It sounds very out of place, very disjointed already, and it's going to be a very interesting thing to see how it even performs, regardless of John and Dave helping out and trying and attempting to fix certain aspects, right? So anyways, guys, fill me in below in the comments what you all have to say about this, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.
Gun in hand, we are alone again. From night to moon, we hear them moans again.